Tell us about how you came to learn about this quite different way of eating, ketogenic and eventually, carnivore diets, especially with like formal training and nutrition that you got, which surely would have been pushing a different way than where you ended up.
Yeah, yeah. I actually started, well, I did a master's degree in nutrition and returned to university to do that in 2016. And that was after, a year after I'd first experimented with a ketogenic diet. And so that by that point, I was in my late 30s. And I would say in, throughout my 20s, I did what most athletes who struggle to be lean but need to be lean like do, which is I would intermittently restrict my calories quite heavily, and I would walk around just a bit hungry most of the time. and and what was always interesting to me was that it didn't matter whether I was at the upper or lower range of my normal weight distribution, my normal weight range. I would be just as hungry at either end of the range. And that didn't seem to make sense to me. Like it felt like if I'm like 5 or 10 pounds heavier, I should be a little bit less hungry.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem to work like that. I was just always hungry. And I just thought, well, I just didn't have an explanation for that. But it was always a little thing in the back of my head that was a little bit like, there's something I don't understand here. um, but that strategy did work for me in my 20s. But I found that once I got to 30, 32, 34, it seemed to take more calorie restriction to get less result. And I found that my weight was just creeping up despite trying harder and harder to keep it down. And I reached a point where I was like, okay, I need to go to square one and look at this problem properly. Because, I mean, I regularly, I'm a professional athlete, so I regularly have every year or really constantly, you're constantly sort of appraising the whole of your approach to training and saying, out of all the suite of components of things that are holding my performance up, where are the strong areas, where are the weak areas? And they shift and change from year to year. Some years I might have, a little bit stronger shoulders and body. Some years I might have a bit stronger fingers, depending on injuries and training and climbs that I've been doing. But I just found that more and more it was just body fat percentage. It was just creeping up, and I knew that was the main factor that was holding me back. That's not the case for some other rock climbers. I think good rock climbers are sometimes self-selected for those who find it easy to be lean. That wasn't me, so I was a little bit of an outlier for that. So I was having difficulty with that, and that was what made me try the ketogenic diet. And I can't remember what the trigger was to try that diet specifically, but I thought, I'll try it for a month. The first time I tried it, I just didn't adhere properly. I didn't get carbs low enough. And so like I went down a pound and didn't feel very good. Felt a bit, the classic carb fueled athlete, slightly deprived of carbs. So I just didn't feel very good. And then after 4 weeks, I gave it up. And then about 6 months later, after reading a bit more, I thought, no, I can see that a lot of people are saying in the initial adaptation, if you're moving away from years and years on a high carb diet, you possibly need to go in pretty hard with a sustained period of carb restriction. And 1 month would be the absolute minimum to even come back to feeling normal. And you're looking at more like several months. So I thought, well, okay, let's do like 6 weeks or 2 months or something, and let's be stricter on the carbohydrate. And it was good because I was going on a trip to Switzerland to go bouldering on my own. So I was away from family. I was away from a normal food culture. I was staying on my own in a little apartment, so I could buy food and only have that food in the place I was staying. And so I adapted to a ketogenic diet there. And that time, I had a savage headache for 5 days straight, the first 5 days. Then for the first 2 weeks, I just felt slightly weird. And then in the second 2 weeks, I just felt better and better. And partly, and I say better and better, in multiple ways. Like, I felt better. I also did notice that my mood was lifting, and my performance was getting better because I was losing weight. I was losing excess fat. So, I lost 2 or 3 kilos, which is a lot. I mean, I can feel like I have my training wall at home in the garage behind me here. And if my weight fluctuates by 1 pound, like I can tell how much my weight's fluctuated by to the pound based on how I climb on the board
Wow.
outside before I
Wow.
even go in. I can just tell exactly. It's very, very sensitive to weight. So I'd lost like 2 or 3 kilos, and it made a big difference to my climbing. But the real kind of light bulb moment was, for all the years I'd been a climber, I'd always be quite anxious about the calories that I would take out to the crag or out on the mountain with me during the day. I would always take 1,000, 1,500 calories with me for a long day out. Just lots of carbs and sugar mainly. Usually some proper like food, like a big sandwich or something that has some meat and some vegetables in it, but a lot of carbs as well. So I'd taken boiled eggs, and I remember going out and I was climbing on really hard stuff for several hours until I was quite exhausted. And then after I couldn't do the hardest stuff anymore, I was going around this forest looking at all these other climbs, all these other boulders. So I was like clambering over boulders up and down hillsides for the whole day. And it was almost dark, and I got in my rucksack and I put my head torch on, and my box of boiled eggs fell out of my bag, and I went, oh, I forgot to eat my lunch. And that was like the moment where I was like, that has never happened ever. So that was and it sounds like a small thing, but it was a really big deal. That's when I knew there's something different here, of that freedom from the hunger. And I realized that I'd done a lot of hard stuff that day, but I'd had a steady energy supply despite the fact it had been 8 hours plus since I ate a couple of boiled eggs that morning. So that's what made me think, I think I'm going to follow this for a little bit longer.
It's so awesome. Yeah. When you start getting to that level, for me, it was cycling, and you just go on a ride. You don't think about when you're going to eat, if you need to stop, what you ate before. You just go on a ride. It could be 10 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon. It could be 2 hours or 3 hours. Like you have that constant energy source that feels so amazing to transition over if you give it enough time. I mean, I just saw another article in a cycling magazine that was based on a study that just came out that, people that ate low fat versus low carb had no difference in VO2 max when they tested after 5 weeks of being on these particular diets. It's like you can't do that after 5 weeks. You're not going to see anything. You need a
Yeah,
longer time to adapt.
yeah, absolutely. And for me, like, the weight thing was just such a huge thing. That would be really different for if you're comparing like an endurance cyclist who's already lean going from a high carb diet to a ketogenic diet. I mean, they may not see any massive improvement. It may only be a tiny improvement, but it might take them a year or maybe more than that to see anything. For me, it was a little bit different. The weight thing, because I had excess fat, because it matters so much in my sport, and the ketogenic diet helped me to get leaner. That made that was a big driver really to sort of fuel my interest in it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but
Oh,
it just it seemed to kind of tick all the boxes that you would want. So I felt like I was eating more food. Like, when I say I felt like, I could track the calories and see that I was eating plenty of calories. Um, and I wasn't hungry. I wasn't having the energy swings. And yet I was also leaner. That just seemed to be the kind of best of all worlds. And in the period since then, I've done several experiments of moving back and forth between lots of different diets, like going back to a kind of standard Western, mixed diet, but still with quite, whole foods, to like a vegetarian, almost vegan, 80% carb diet, to carnivore diets, to different versions of ketogenic diets. Because, like, I always kind of wonder, like, maybe you try something once and it coincides with a period where all of your training just came together and you had a good performance. And so that just makes you think, oh, that's the best diet in the world. I'll just keep following it. And then you think, oh, every other diet is just not as good. But I thought, it's easy to jump to that conclusion a bit prematurely. So I have since then tried many different diets. And yeah, we can talk about that. That's also been interesting.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I love the way you experiment with all that stuff, and you really take the scientific approach of not trying to, use, like you said, correlation be causation. Those are two different things, and you can't say that your diet was good, but also so was your training. So it wasn't the diet. You don't really know, but you can further test it. And at the end of the day, you are the only person that matters the most in testing those things. And eventually, that testing got you to a carnivore diet. Is that right? Like, how did you decide to try that?
Well, I suppose like a lot of people, the first time I ever became aware that the carnivore diet was even a thing was listening to a lecture by Amber O'Hearn. And I remember like that was after I'd been doing a ketogenic diet for some time. And I remember having that first reaction of like, only meat? Like, oh no, that's just ridiculous.
What?
It's just taking way too far. Like, why? Why would you even do that? So I did take some time to listen to Amber's explanation of why that related to her with psychological health conditions, and the difference that made to her. But that did make me think, well, that's interesting, because like I definitely noticed a significant mood improvement with the ketogenic diet. But it also, through doing a keto diet, one of the things I did was also experiment with a bit of fasting. At first, I used to do like 36-hour fasts here and there. That was quite interesting. Then I did a couple of 2-day fasts. And then I did a 7-day fast, just because at that time, there was a lot of discussion online about fasting. Walter Longo's research was coming out, and he was talking a lot about fasting. And I was curious about it. And I was curious about this. I mean, I studied physiology. I'm very interested in physiology as an exercise in itself, independent from my own health journey and performance. I'm just interested to see how the body copes with different circumstances. So the idea that people were saying that they actually felt fine on a 7-day fast, or they actually felt better later in the fast, that was just a pure curiosity for me. So I remember doing a 7-day fast, and one of the other health problems that I've had my whole life is quite bad eczema. It only affects my feet, but it did give me constant pain. I spend a lot of time either in very small, tight rock shoes, which are kind of sweaty and horrible, and that aggravates it, or big mountaineering boots. And I remember I used to have to play psychological games with myself to not think about having to put my mountaineering boots on in the morning, because like the first half an hour walking in them was just horrible, just painful, every day, and feet are bleeding and all that, and it's just not good. So it was a health issue I had that I just thought would never change, and I would have it all my life. When I did it fast, in 2 days, it just disappeared. All the anger, all the redness and inflammation on my feet, you could just see the redness just go. And so within 2-3 days, all the broken skin was starting to heal over. And by the 7th day, my feet just looked like normal feet for the first time since I was a baby. And so that gave me, so it returned as soon as I started to eat again. But that did give me then a clue. It's like, okay, this eczema has some connection to nutrition, my gut or digestion. I don't know what the connection is. It could be multiple things. I guess a microbiome researcher might tell you it's related to the microbiome. Someone else might say it's related to gut barrier function and having a proper actual barrier. And yeah, there's lots of other, some people might say it's an autoimmune reaction, and how that's mediated, whether that's related to the gut barrier or microbiome. There's many possible mechanisms, but the fact is I now knew that it was modifiable. It was possible for it to go away. And at that time, there was more people starting to do the carnivore diet, and I could see that they were saying that in particular those who had autoimmune conditions were seeing remission from those with a carnivore diet. So that did help to make me think, right, I'll do that. So I did that for 6 weeks, and in 2 days for the eczema to disappear. for the duration, I did I did, I think, 6 weeks on a carnivore diet, and then returned to a mixed plant and animal ketogenic diet. And my eczema did return. And this is going back like 4 or 5 years now. So I've done several stages of experiments. Subsequently, I did another 7-day fast, and my eczema disappeared again. But curiously, when I returned to the mixed diet, the eczema returned, but only on one foot.
Interesting.